and welcome. As always, the video of this meeting is streamed live on YouTube and will also be available on Facebook and the Village's website. I want to thank everybody for coming out. Wish you all a happy Columbus Day and happy Indigenous People Day. Indigenous People Day. We'll be working on that, I guess, throughout the night. And we should have a interesting meeting tonight for everybody. At this time, I would ask Deputy Clerk Charity Jones, wearing that hat today, to call the roll.
Trustee Augustine?
Here.
Trustee Gale?
Here.
Trustee McGee? Absent. Trustee O'Brien?
Here.
Trustee Peterson?
Here.
Trustee Thompson?
Here.
And President Kugler.
Here. And Trustee McGee is helping an ill family member, and Clerk Saladino is traveling. So Deputy Clerk Charity Jones is wearing a lot of hats tonight, one being stepping in and handling the duties that normally Clerk Saladino does. So at this time, I would invite the audience to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. And I'll start. Pledge allegiance to the flag.
The United States of America, to the republic, which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, free,
I'm going to jump right in, and we have a real exciting thing to start out with, and that's a mural that was painted. And we have a couple of people that are going to help us. But here tonight is Erica Vazana, I believe, is here, as well as Chris Selly, who is Lizzie's husband, and Lizzie's the artist, and is unable to come because of a medical issue. So the mural is for the village. It's made possible through the sponsorship of Lizzie Selly Studios and the West End Gallery, located at 522 West Burlington, Unit 2. Erica Vazano is a local Riverside artist who operates a business called The End Design. Erica has donated her time and talent for Riverside Arts Weekend and various community art projects in Riverside. Lizzie is an abstract artist, curator, and founder of the Lizzie Selly Studio and the West End Gallery, which is located in our LaGrange. Lizzie channels pain from migraine headaches into vibrant, mixed media art that blends energizing colors, rich textures, invoking joy and resilience. Under the guidance of muralist Erica Vazana, and through the participation of many residents and visitors at the West End Art Festival this year, the mural was created. So I appreciate you joining us tonight. We also have Kathy DeMonico from the LGBA, and I welcome the presentation.
Thank you very much. Tonight, we're pleased to celebrate the work of two local artists, our beloved Lizzie Selly and the renowned muralist Erica Vazana, and their contributions to the West End Arts Festival, which is a cornerstone of our LaGrange community that highlights the joyful power of art. Together, they help the LaGrange Business Association offer our community a sense of connection and inclusivity through the creation of a public art mural. The 2024 West End Arts Festival Community Mural is a vibrant piece that celebrates the joy of art for all. Both adults and children were invited to contribute and interact with its creation. This mural embodies our collective spirit and creativity, and I kindly ask the Village of LaGrange to proudly display it in the West End at the historic Stone Avenue Station, where it can inspire and uplift anyone who views it. Unfortunately, as you mentioned, Lizzie is unable to be with us tonight, but her husband, Chris, and Erica will present the public art mural to you, President Kugler, the Board of Trustees, and the entire community of LaGrange. Chris and Erica.
Should we go down? Maybe it's easiest. Or first, please tell us about the mural. Boy, awesome. All right. Yeah, and maybe the whole board can get, and we'll get a picture taken with the board. So thank you.
Pieces from last year. And so they're all inspired about the power of connection and community. You know, as Mark and Kathy mentioned, my wife couldn't be here because she has migraine. And unfortunately, a year ago, actually right before the last year's West End Art Festival, you know, she was beset with a migraine that didn't abate. You know, and so it was sun up to sundown. And it put us through the hardest year of our life, and it would really sort of tested our own resiliency. And one of the messages that she really internalized, both from our friends, from our support network, from our family, was to find joy and to choose your calling. And so she was inspired by that to really want to create art that brought greater connection and joy back to our community. So she was extremely excited to sponsor and partner with Erica for this piece at the West End Art Festival. She is doing much better. I mean, unfortunately, she had a breakthrough migraine tonight, but she was able to work the West End Art Festival this time and was able to contribute to this piece as well.
Yeah, so just, and you don't know how artists work, and I'll be really, really brief. When Lizzie asked me to co-create this with her, she says, joyer. So we design it together, and then I just facilitate when people and folks are coming who've never touched a brush before. Anybody from 2 years old to 99 years old, whoever was there that day, I just said, come on up. And of course, there was a woman walking that she was from Western Springs, and she goes, Erica Vazana? I said, yes. She says, I have one of your pieces. You donated a piece when her friend Ashley had passed away, and she's like, and I see it every day, and it brings me joy. And then, really quick, after the festival, I went for a late lunch dinner at Luca's. And I'm sitting at the bar, having a drink and having dinner, and I started a conversation with the nice lady next to me. And I said, what's your name? What do you think her name is? Joy. So it was just like, it really was all this was meant to be, the connections, and I'm happy to do it. I'm a local Riversider, so we're neighbors, but my niece and nephew, they both live in Grange, they have their hand on here, so it means a lot to me too. So I'm very, very grateful and thankful. Thank you.
Anybody wants to? Yeah. So it's on.
Yeah, and it will be stretched. This is unstretched, so it's in the process of we have a framer that's going to frame it, and then that's then easily on.
Awesome. Well, you can grab on too.
So, all right.
Everybody else, see the camera?
Thank you. Thank you.
Feeling better soon? That's great. What a great way to start the meeting. And other great things. This week, the fire department held a wonderful fire prevention open house last Thursday. The weather was spectacular. The turnout of residents, both young and old, was fantastic. The kids got to play a lot of games, including squirting a fire hose at different obstacles. I got to sit in the fire truck. They got to tour the firehouse. And then they saw demonstrations of burnings, both in sprinkler outfitted buildings and non outfitted buildings. And it was truly wonderful. In the spirit of Fire Prevention Week, all residents are encouraged to take a few moments to plan and practice a safe fire escape. And one of the keys in the fire escape is when having a meeting place outside. And I heard the firemen talking, a tree or something away from the structure, but that the family all knows to go to so they know everybody got out safely. And always please replace and check your smoke detectors. It is National Highway Traffic Safety Administration's National Pedestrian Safety Month. The goal of this effort is to increase awareness of pedestrian safety and remind everyone that staying safe on sidewalks and roadways is a shared responsibility. As the days get shorter, the sun sets sooner, decreased visibility increases the risk to pedestrians and bicyclists. The police department and all of us here at the village encourage motorists to be especially vigilant when approaching intersections, crosswalks, or passing bicyclists. It is fall. Fall leaf pickup program began last week and will continue through November 24th. Leaves will generally be collected every other week by the Public Works Department from villages' streets. Leaves should be raked to the curb. No bags or yard waste stickers are required for this service. If it looks like there's going to be rain, please try to keep them out of the street for the rainstorm, and please try to clear the catch basins so that we don't have flooding. Rick, maybe I can put you on the spot and ask, are we again collecting some leaves for mulching?
Yeah, we are. So last year we took a component of the leaves, then we're able to use that part of our brush collection and part of the free mulch pile. So we take what we can in terms of the space we have to recycle the leaves that we have. And also there's the opportunity, even if you're not going to put your leaves in the street, to compost.
And I would recommend that everybody do their best to compost their leaves in their gardens. I know that what I like to do is use my lawnmower to cut up the leaves and then spread them in the garden. It makes for great compost. We also, at this time, want to ask, although we're putting leaves into the street, don't put your garbage or recycling toters in the street. Keep those out on the parkway so that the equipment can come and gather up all the leaves. With that, I would ask Manager Knight for the manager's report.
Sure. Thank you, President Kukler, and good evening, everyone. As previously shared, the village has entered into a 2-year municipal aggregation agreement with MC Squared Energy Services. Under the program, eligible accounts can participate in a program that allows the village to purchase renewable energy credits and earn a designation as an EPA Green Power Community. Participants pay a price equal to the ComEd rate for a 24-month term that begins in November 24, so just next month. Qualifying accounts may opt in or out at any time without penalties, and it's worth noting that the electric supply and solar industries have quite a few vendors in that space, so if you have any confusion regarding the program, please visit the village's website. Lastly, before we dive into the village code updates, I'd like to take the opportunity to recognize the efforts of the village's staff in addressing an incident over at BNSF Railroad Crossing and Grange Road. This happened about 2 weeks ago now, week and a half. Village fire and police departments responded immediately, ensuring that the site was safe, secure, and that traffic was properly rerouted. Personnel on the scene and elsewhere worked to address the follow-up steps, which included bringing in a heavy wrecker to remove the cantilever as well as the truck that was blocking the tracks. In the following days, much effort was also placed with our partners over at BNSF and IDOT to make sure that the traffic signal timing and the routing was done correctly so that motorists did not find themselves waiting an undue period of time. So again, a sincere thanks for everybody that responded to that incident. It went as well as it could have when the signal gets hit by a truck. Item A on the manager's report includes a comprehensive update to Title VI of the proposed updates to the Village Code. As part of an ongoing effort to comprehensively update the Village Code, tonight Title VI has been prepared for the Village Board's consideration, and those updates, as before, have been reviewed by the Village's consultant, staff, village attorneys, and are now presented for Village Board consideration. Attachments to the item presented tonight include a table listing more substantive changes, accompanied by an explanation of those changes. Overall, the changes that are presented are reflective of changes to conform to state law, remove outdated provisions, clarify permitting regulations for parades, refine parking provisions, add regulations regarding electric bikes and scooters, and add current-day regulations on numerous criminal acts, including the unlawful use of a weapon and retail theft. Included along with this item is a clean copy, strike-through version as well. Any proposed changes to what is presented will be incorporated in a final draft of the Village Code that, in the case of Title VI, will be presented at the next Village Board meeting for adoption in preparation for the Village's upcoming administrative hearing process. President Kukler, the staff is present and ready to capture any input we have on Title VI.
Okay, so with that, I would ask if anybody, and I see Trustee Gale with a question or comment.
I did. It's both for Jack and Ben. It's just regarding. I saw you mentioned e-bikes and the definitions there. In this code are going to change. I was just curious as to I anecdotally I see kids on these things like going fast, but then also I see like at least in downtown Chicago you see people on these things on the sidewalks like whipping around, and I just wanted to make sure what's captured here within this change to make sure that if folks are sort of, using these things inappropriately, like what kind of protections do we have or what kind of enforcement is there?
Of course. Would you like to provide an outline of those?
So in the code revisions that we made, one of the primary changes was to incorporate into the definition of bicycles the inclusion of low-speed electric bicycles and low-speed gas bicycles. And those terms come out of the Illinois Vehicle Code. So we're not reinventing the wheel on definitions. But the idea is to treat them in many ways like we do bicycles, which hopefully most people in the community know there are regulations about bicycles. And so we're trying to make sure those are, these e-bikes are included. So, for example, we prohibit the use of bicycles in village-owned parking facilities, except when biking in or leaving the facility. You can go to a bike rack, but you can't just decide to ride in circles and play in the middle of a parking lot. We have prohibitions on bicycles riding them, and this would include e-bikes, in a manner that endangers persons or property, reckless biking, so to speak. So if you have people who are using e-bikes, which I know can go pretty fast, but you're doing it in a way that's creating a danger, we have a general provision that prohibits that. We have, in these changes, making clear that, riding bicycles, including e-bikes on sidewalks and public ways, cannot be done, particularly in commercial districts. So you can't go up and down the sidewalks here, downtown. And that was true whether it's a normal bicycle or certainly an e-bike because of their speed. There's a provision that now requires e-bikes to have lights if you're going to use them at night. So you have to have a lamp on your bike. We have a provision that would prohibit more than one person from riding on a motorized bicycle and requires riders to ride on a seat. So you can't, again, and it goes back to ultimately this, what is the safe way to operate? And if you're putting on 2 or 3 people onto an e-bike, that would be a violation of our code if adopted. And then we have a provision on reckless conduct, making e-bikes and self-propelled vehicles subject to the provisions regarding riding with excessive speed, lack of proper control, and willful or wanton disregard for the safety of persons or property. Also, it's important to note that while not e-bikes, we also have provisions in our current code, and they are in this draft of Title VI, that does govern other types of vehicles, skateboards, rollerblades, roller skates, coasters, scooters, toy vehicles, and electric personal assistive mobility devices such as a Segway or similar device. So even if it may not be an e-bike in design, but it would fall, and meet that technical definition under the Illinois Vehicle Code, if it falls under a scooter or a toy vehicle and so forth, we prohibit them from using roadways. So think about e-bikes that don't have the same amount of power, but ones that are more meant as vehicles as a toy or a wagon or little scooters, ones that oftentimes that are small and would be particularly dangerous if they were in the middle of traffic because they wouldn't be as visible to a vehicle, or they go at such a slow speed that it would really disrupt traffic. That in our code is prohibited currently, and that would continue. We also have provisions on those types of conveyances from using them on the sidewalks and other public ways in the C1 and C2 commercial districts.
Okay. I think you covered it. Thanks, Ben.
Well, I know this is a topic that is a big one, and I will say it's not unique to LaGrange. We see it with a lot of other clients as well, where this is the kind of the question, particularly because e-bikes have really become more popular over the last few years. It's new issues that are arising that didn't exist 10 years ago. That's how we've kind of captured it here, and of course we will take direction from the board if you think that we need additional regulations or less regulations, or if you think they need to be modified in any way.
Thank you. And just to follow up on that, Attorney Schuster, Jack and I are interviewing administrative adjudicators, the hearing officer for that position, Tuesday and Wednesday. And are these type of things that can go before the adjudicator?
Yes, they certainly can.
Fantastic. Good. Any other questions or comments with this section?
I would just
Trustee Icy.
thank you, President Kugler. On this particular topic, we don't go deep into the age requirements so much. Is this thing on? There we go. And I think that when we talked about this at previous meetings, we talked about sending some messaging out to the public through the Facebook page. I think you've done some of that already. Now that we're getting into the colder weather, we won't see as much from the children, but maybe in the spring and routinely we can kind of refresh and send out some of the requirements for the children, because those are most of the complaints that I've gotten. It's not so much adult e-bike riders as it is the children on the electric or gas-powered scooters or mini motorcycles.
Correct. So we intend to continue to message out on that, as well as work with the schools to send home messages to the parents to try to help us in enforcement of that as well.
Thank you. And thank you, Ben, and then Jack. Will you introduce the next item?
Yes, thank you, President Kugler. This item under the manager's report, this is item B. It's a comprehensive update to Title V, Part 2 of the Village Code. This was prepared in the same manner as Title VI, and includes a couple of different clarifications and updates provisions to reflect current day requirements and practices, eliminates outdated or duplicative provisions, clarifies regulations, and aligns with current village practices, adding clarity regarding certain things like injurious materials on roadways, demolition debris, driveway permit application processes, and provisions applicable to utility companies. Any proposed changes to what is presented in the will be incorporated into the final draft of the Village Code, which will be considered again here in the fall. That concludes my report on that one. We're happy to take any input the board has.
Thank you, Manager Knight. With that, any input on this section, Section 6? Trustee Augustine.
Thank you, President Kugler. We're on section Title V or Title VI?
I'm sorry, 5.
Okay, well, can I go back to Title VI because I messed up?
You sure can.
Thanks. I wanted to bring up two things. probably for Ben. Trespassing, page 2, offenses. Would this apply to, let's say, people entering into residential yards to steal political signs of one way or the other? I mean, that's, I've had a few friends have some signs stolen recently, and while it may be comical to some, I know they don't love it. That is against the law, and that's what's written out here. That would apply, correct?
So that would certainly be a violation, but I don't know that it would be necessarily trespass to land unless there are signs or other notices that are provided. So for example, if I walk up somebody's driveway, up their front walk into their front door, right, that would not, and knock on their front door, that's not a trespass. Generally, it is not a trespass if you go, wander necessarily into somebody's front yard unless there's a sign up under our code. If you have prior notice that you can't do it, but certainly taking a sign that is not yours is a violation of our code as well as other criminal laws. You cannot just go onto somebody's property and take private property. So that would be the best way typically to handle that. But where this gets to is, really when somebody does have notice, you cannot just go and stay on somebody else's property.
So if someone decided to call the police about this, which I don't think they will, it would be theft, and possibly also trespass, because that's how they got it. Okay, I just,
Maybe it depends on the circumstances and the property and how it's set up, but yes.
Okay. And the other thing was on page 42 of section 5.6, title 6 area, and this is the strike-through version. There's a rule about getting tickets for bikes if they are tied up to a fence or a pole or things that aren't bike racks. And I would just ask, as a frequent bike rider into town, while we're in the process of getting more bike racks put in, there aren't a lot. And I don't know that this is a high volume of things that we ticket. That would be something Chief Griffin would know. But I think we should be a little lenient on that matter until we have more places for people to put their bikes, because I'm finding we don't have too much right now. And so it's really just a comment for that.
Thank you, Trustee Augustine. Any other comments on 5 or 6? Okay, thank you. And I want to thank the village board for providing your thoughts and suggestions, and for the efforts of Attorney Schuster and his staff in assembling the proposed changes, as well as our staff with Charity Jones and Jack Knight working really hard on these. Title VII is the last to be reviewed prior to the consultant finalizing the draft, and we're grateful for the continued progress on this important initiative. So at this time, I'd ask Deputy Clerk Jones to read the items under the consent agenda, followed by those appearing under current business.
Certainly. Items on the consent agenda have been considered previously or have been determined to be of a routine nature. Any member of the Board of Trustees may request that an item be moved from the consent agenda to be considered under current business. On the consent agenda, there's one item, item A, the consolidated voucher for tonight's meeting. Under current business, items under current business are prepared for action by the Board of Trustees. Item A, an ordinance adopting a comprehensive plan for the Village of LaGrange.
Thank you. Next on tonight's agenda is public comments regarding agenda items. At this time, I'd ask anyone in the audience who has any comments on those items, including on the comprehensive plan, to come up to the podium in the center and share your comments.
My name is John Pluto. I live in LaGrange. I'm interested in what Mr. Schuster brought out about bicycles and all the safety things. Wouldn't that be covered under a state law already?
There are state laws that cover some things, but most cities, villages, municipalities also have their own codes.
Okay. Because I notice every morning about 4:30, a guy comes past my house with an electric bike that has no lights on it. It's very dangerous. And I'm just surprised that, there should be a federal law that requires every bicycle made have a blinking red strobe and a blinking light in the front, I think. But I was just thinking about that and finding out what your thoughts were.
Thank you. Any other comments, concerns? Seeing no more, we will proceed to the consent agenda. And may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda in a second?
I move we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Thank you, Trustee Gale. Trustee Thompson. Any questions, comments?
Well, to start, as previously stated, I recuse myself from voting on any agenda items related to the village prosecutor.
Thank you.
Aye. Trustee Thompson.
Aye.
And that passes unanimously. Thank you. Next up is current business, and it's the ordinance adopting a comprehensive plan. The motion was heard during last meeting and continued to today, so we don't need another motion. But I will do just a brief introduction. Over the past year, the village has worked with Teska Associates, who are here tonight, to update the village's comprehensive plan, which is the tool to help guide future decision-making in matters of public policy, local regulation, development review, and allocation of resources associated with land use and development. And with that, I'd like to acknowledge Michael Blue from Teska, along with his consultant team who's joined us tonight, and along with Robert Morris from the RTA. The comprehensive plan is a policy document, and while it may include recommendations for future changes to regulations, it does not establish regulations itself. The plan encapsulates a long-range perspective for the next 10 to 15 years and includes goals that are ongoing and may not be fully achieved within that 15-year horizon. Last month, the village began its consideration of the comprehensive plan. Again, the village itself broadly has been considering this for over a year. The item was tabled from last meeting, and tonight's discussion is a continuation of that conversation. As previously shared with the village board, we will proceed with the review and discussion of the plan section by section. So I do not need a motion at this time, but we have the motion on the floor. We may get to a vote. We will see. I did email all trustees kind of the plan of attack. So if for some reason it doesn't go according to where you wanted, or you need to jump in and change something, feel free. It's flexible in that regard. And I'm going to just start as it was written. So we're on visions and goals. To start with, any comments just under the visions and goals before I go to the 4 sets of strategies? We're at 24 and 25 currently. Community character chapter, vision and goals. All right, any comments on pages 24 and 25? Seeing none, we'll move along to strategies. There's 4 sets of strategies proposed. Number 1 is design standards, page 29 to 34, including revised design standards for our current overlay, expanded design standards for South LaGrange Road and new multifamily residential development, and revised height standards to allow 5-story buildings as a matter of right in certain areas along the BNSF corridor, zoned R8, C1, or C2. So I'll start with any comments on pages 29 to 34. Trustee Gale.
All right, I'll jump in and get us started. Well, for me, on page 33 is where we're talking about the design standards to revise the height of 5 stories as of right. I would want to at least start by striking 5 stories as of right. It strikes me as just a bridge too far for us as a village. I think one of the options would be perhaps to simply just remove any change as of right and keep things as they are, where we require basically developers to come in front of us to make any changes. Another option would be to, I think the code is already 3, is that right, Charity? And maybe to say we'll consider 4 as of right once we update the zoning code. Because what's going to happen after this is just going to be our guidelines, right? And then it's going to be what do we actually put in the zoning code, right? Right, Charity?
That's correct.
Yeah. So language to that effect, I think.
Well, I as you know, I agree with you, or at least your first half, which is striking the 5-story by right. Again, I do believe that if we put it in the comprehensive code, when it comes to, it's going to set direction that this is something that the board wants. And I just think that we're already having developers know that, that they can do that. The last one that hasn't been built yet, but that is been approved for Hillgrove, at least the residents were able to speak and be heard about what they want. I know that, and I again talked earlier tonight about the disappointment when you live behind these buildings that are going from 2 stories to much larger. So I think making it a matter of right is definitely sending the wrong signal. But looking forward to hearing from everybody else.
Thank you, President. Oh, go ahead, Glenn.
Oh, no, go ahead. No.
On this matter, and it is a tricky one, we have to remind ourselves that this is a goal and a thought process, and it's not code or voted on or implemented yet. But it's a signal that we're willing to consider these things, and a lot of our newer housing developments are already 5 and 6 stories. Previous 2005 Comprehend Plan had 3 as a right. So, I mean, at the very least, I think we should be looking at 4. I'd like it to be some kind of middle ground so that it looks like we're leaning into development that builders would be interested in coming to this village for. So I'd like to not stay exactly the same as we were 20 years ago. I'd like to see some progress there, especially in regard to the fact that we've carefully allowed in many developments in that period of time that, again, are 4, 5, and 6 routinely, and I don't think we'll get a lot of residential developments that are any less than that. But it's still going to have to, as we know, go through Plan Commission and zoning, be anything higher than 4, as farther away from the rail line where what we consider our BNSF corridor. And I think if we remove that, we remove a lot of concerns from our most vocal residents on this topic. But I wouldn't want to necessarily just throw out what has been put into this plan because of feedback from lots of residents and the thoughts of our staff on what might be good for development, knowing that this board, our strong commissions, will have to decide whether those are worthy or not, or whether we want to change the rules or not. This plan isn't necessarily changing rules on zoning or code. It is merely indicating that we should consider it, or at least be open to it.
Okay, Trustee Thompson?
And
So I guess my comments go to kind of match Trustee Augustine, Trustee Gales. I think a compromise would probably be 4-story by right, not 5-story. Most of the buildings we have approved been 4 or 5 stories, but also I think we do need to go back and limit the map. I think there's probably even some further places where it should be reduced down, but I know if we're talking about developing Calendar Court, any building ever built on Calendar Court would have to be 5 stories to allow the replacement of the parking plus the parking for that. So you'd have to have 5 stories on that building, if not 6. They'll ever allow anything to ever be built there, there'd be no parking left. So I think we need to, so I think a 4-story by right would, since that's what we're building, if we limit it to the section of the area it should be done in, I think that works better. I guess the one question I've also got is, we kind of skipped over it on page 32. It looks like we're changing.
I can provide some clarity on that. So currently, any development that meets all of our zoning requirements doesn't have to go before the Plan Commission. That's what by right means, is that they conform to the zoning code requirements. However, any project that impacts the exterior of a building or is building a new building in our design review overlay is required to go through a review process with the Design Review Commission, and then ultimately those design review permits get voted on by this board. What this plan recommends is revising that design review process within our current overlay district and the expanded areas, as President Kugler described, so that minor changes to existing buildings can get approved more at the staff level, and development process that you're used to seeing, which goes before the Plan Commission. Regardless of what the height limit is that's in the code, that process remains the same. If someone's seeking relief from the height or other provisions of the code, they go through that Plan Commission process.
Thank you.
So, and I think that clarifies, and that's my concern, is by right. First, I don't think it's progress that residents can't say, hey, I live directly behind this building. I don't want what used to be a 2-story building to be a 5-story building by right. I live over in the section by Hillgrove. I know a lot of the neighbors that live over there. I understand their concerns, and I don't think eliminating their ability to have feedback is progress at all. I do believe that we've shown as a village since the last comprehensive plan that we're very open to diverse buildings. And again, I would talk to the Uptown Apartments, the Mason projects, 50 South Ashland, and the Hillgrove project that got reviewed or approved. It was approved. The developer knew that they were going to have to work with the community, the neighbors, but it got approved. And I think, to me, that's the process that we should have. And again, I think it's a matter of opinion. 3-story versus 4-story, where the developer doesn't need to come and speak with the residents. But I'll listen to any more comments. I don't know. We have one trustee missing, and
I just want to make sure I understand. So you're saying whether this is the height of the building remains at 3 or moves to 4 or 5, you don't want the words by right, which would, I don't want to say the word eliminate,
let me answer that. By right is in there. So you can build 3 by right.
Okay, 3 by right
The
stays.
comprehensive plan as drafted says 5 by right.
Right. All right.
I have a problem. I'd rather
Yes.
keep it at 3 by right.
Yeah.
I think Trustee Thompson said 4 by right, and I'm not sure, Trustee Augustine, if you were saying 4 or 5 or both.
I was suggesting 4 as a compromise. I mean, again, either way, we don't vote on this tonight and it goes into play. I think there will be healthy conversation around it, but I think I'd be comfortable with 4. I think we, at least if it goes through the process and the residents show up, and there's a lot of residents who are interested in different things, and I'd be interested in that language staying in to some degree to push us to have that conversation. I think we have to keep in mind that some developers will never come to this town if they see it that way, and that is what I'm hearing. At the same time, I definitely don't want to upset or disrupt any of the residents. But again, as you said, most of our developments have been larger. But I think we are losing the attention and the interest of a lot of development projects that could be great for Grange by having very limited heights. And Charity, maybe you can add to this because it's in here, or Michael Blue.
Well, let me ask if there's any more trustee comments.
I have a compromise that might get us to language. So, the way page 33 is written is like, amending the code to allow 5 as right. Sounds like everybody's like, nope. So we could say something to the effect of consider amending the code to allow 4 as of right. And there we're sort of kicking it to that subsequent revision of the zoning code. And we're not, we're sort of saying, look, we're at 3, we're going to consider 4, but we're not saying 4 as of right in the document, because I think your point, Mr. President, is a good one, which if we say 4 is a right in here or 5 is a right, then kind of how do we explain when we don't amend the zoning code to do that?
Okay.
That's my idea. So we put that, that legal word, consider.
All right.
I'm going to ask you to say it one more time.
So,
Not the whole explanation.
so like
but the
where
phrase.
I'm looking at, I'm looking at like the second paragraph on
Right.
page 33. Consider amending the code to allow 4 stories
Okay.
Okay.
as of right.
All right. That's kind of similar to what I was saying.
All right, then let
I
me.
like that. I like that.
All right, let me then kick it to either Charity or Mr. Blue to comment on that. First, I'll let Trustee Augustine. What did you want them to comment on?
We really need a new microphone here. All right, just what we're talking about. We had a lot of feedback from community and developers and different stakeholders in the village. So I know you didn't arrive by this number accidentally. I think there was interest in it. And again, we're all careful, caring board members here and as a staff of what we do or don't do. But there's a reason for this, and it went through Plan Commission, and they seemed okay with this becoming conversation. Again, it's not going to happen unless we all go through the motions, but it is. I think it pushes us to have a really good conversation about this and where these things could go. So I got the sense that going with 5, which is where a lot of our structures are in that height-wise anyway, that's why it's in there. Doesn't mean it'll happen. I do think it probably will fall to 4. But anyway, I wanted them to talk about where the 4 and 5 by right, and I know you regretted saying the by right in the first place in the language, but you could just kind of go through that with us again.
Okay. Hello again, everybody. Michael Blue from Tesca Associates. You're touching on all the key points, and I would just start with the first one, which is adopting the comprehensive plan does not change the height automatically. That comes as a zoning change. So I know we've said that a couple of times, but I want to reiterate it. Where did 5 come from? 5 came from very much the character that's already in downtown. So there were a number of buildings that are like that. The qualifier on 5 was a couple of things. It was those specific sites that are listed in the plan. I know there's been some concern and question about one of the parking lots, whether it should be on the list. But the village's practice has been to review it as part of a PUD, and most of the discussion in part of those approvals was really about the design and the character of the buildings. And that's something that we got at, and you see it here in terms of design standards. And design standards, the idea of what to emphasize is hinted at here about the kinds of step backs and other character elements that make it easier to live near or next to one of these. And those would be up for review, as Director Jones said. All that would be up for review as part of the process as it went through the architectural process. So I guess bottom line, 5 was the idea because of that's the standard now, and in keeping with that character.
Do you have, as a person that drafts comprehensive plans or assists in drafting comprehensive plans, it concerns with us if we changed it to consider allowing 4 as a matter of right?
These are, as I also always often say, is a policy choice. But I would reiterate what you said, which is what we're doing here is opening a conversation that will ultimately be adopted as part of zoning. If you say 4 in the plan, then that's really the conversation that you're opening. If you say 5, then you're having that conversation. You may well, and again, I'm just repeating what I've heard you all say because you're all over, you've got this conversation down. If you start with 4, then 5 kind of comes off the table. 5 is consistent with the character that's downtown, and there was logic to that being where the conversation started. Do I have a concern? The concern is yours, Mr. President. It's a policy.
I'm going for 3, so I have a much different concern than you on that. I just wanted you answered it, and I think that's great. Is it since here? Does anybody have any more questions for Mr. Blue on this topic only? After hearing that, are you still comfortable with the language considering allowing 4 as a matter of right?
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say I would approve. I am in agreement with that.
And I think I saw Trustee Gale nodding his head, Trustee O'Brien nodding his head down here. After hearing what Mr. Blue said, are you comfortable with that language? Trustee Thompson? Okay. And then Trustee Augustine? And that's a yes. Okay. So we are done with that section, but do we need to move back to page 32? Trustee Thompson, you mentioned something, or we got that covered?
You clarified that. I appreciate that. Thank you.
I had another
Trustee
sort of
Gale.
Related, so
Please.
not the height.
That's fine.
But we've got sort of a bullet list here, and it's similar to what we were just hitting on, but it's about what kind of standard then applies to the structure. And one of the things about, when we talk about existing buildings, a lot of the buildings that are site, like, I'm a lawyer, right? Consider applying residential standards to the mixed use buildings, or better define. Because what I struggle with is when we talk about mixed use, again, we seem to apply the commercial standard. But when we talk about all residential, then we apply the residential standard to these developments. And so, yeah.
Did you know what Trustee Gale's getting at there?
Yeah, no, I understand his concern. I think perhaps, although we do have that little bit of a bulleted list about sites that are appropriate for the 5 or now the 4-story development, maybe it would be actually under the design standards where we're talking about refining and detailing design guidelines in the current overlay district to ensure that we have standards. We can add a sentence about, ensuring that the new standards include guidelines specific for mixed-use properties, which is really what we don't have as much of detailed in our code now.
Do any trustees have concern with that change?
Well, I would have a concern with what Trustee Gill just said, because let's take the calendar parking lot. If we suddenly say mixed use has to be residential and we put setbacks and all that in it, that lot's no longer developable. If you don't go out to look at like a business district building where the building comes out to the sidewalks, there's not enough room in that lot to ever develop it. And it really would be true important retail space downstairs with apartments or condos, townhomes above it. So I think it's really up to where that building's actually going to be built would determine what kind of building would go there. Because if we're trying to develop a downtown lot, it's got to take up every square inch of it, or we're never going to develop anything.
I'm not sure that that's true, but Deputy Director Jones, do you, from hearing from Trustee Thompson, does your language that you were proposing incorporate that, or does it need further refinement?
I think we can incorporate language that we can send to the board that addresses both concerns. It is, practically speaking, saying we need guidelines that are specific to mixed-use developments, but it's not saying exactly what those should be. That really does need to get refined as we're developing the design guidelines. I can appreciate the perspectives from both trustees, and I think that we can come up with some proposals that will address both of their concerns, but that's really the work that needs to happen when we develop the design guidelines.
Right, and to me, I'd agree with you on the calendar lot. It's a very unique lot, and again, I don't need a lot of emails. we don't have any pending projects for the calendar lot. We would require any developer that wanted to purchase the calendar lot to make sure that there was equal public parking for whatever spots are being taken. But that, because of its location, doesn't have any residents around it, and the setbacks are different versus other areas that have residents immediately adjoining and are greatly impacted if you go all the way to the lot line. So are we comfortable down there? Are we comfortable right now? Okay.
Peggy wants to have one more thing.
Sure.
And that is, when I was reading the comprehensive plan, I came across these building codes, or I guess the zoning code, C1, et cetera. And I kept being referred to a map. So I have asked Charity to include those in the glossary so that when I see them, I can flip to the glossary.
Housing environment to identify opportunities to improve housing affordability. Any comments on that? Trustee Augustine or Thompson, whoever wants to go down there first.
Thank you, President Kukla. I'm sorry that Trustee McGee's not here tonight. Increase the allow triplexes, fourplexes, and the R6 zoning district, which the main R6 zoning district, is the east side, and we talk about the historic value of the east side on page 41. What we've seen is smaller, and so I would really like for us to, if we're going to protect the east side, we need to protect the east side and not just turn into a wholesale teardown section, which I think you would find. There's a couple of houses over there for sale now that a builder would jump in and tear it down and build a fourplex, triplex in a heartbeat because he knows he can make his money back on it. So if we're going to try to protect an area of town, I think it's important that we work to, because that R6 section, I realize there's some up and down Grange Road, which is already kind of that area, but I just think that's too broad an area to cover that area.
Yeah, I share some of your concerns. I also share, though, the concern of some of those buildings that are truly dilapidated and need to be torn down, whether they be replaced with a single-family house or a different housing structure, is definitely a concern. It's also a concern of mine. 2 flats, 3 flats, 4 flats may be the affordable. Again, they're just more affordable than a single family. That doesn't mean that they're not going to be required to be, great materials, look nice, increase the look of the community versus take away the look of the community. But exactly, I share your concerns. I appreciate you sharing the concerns, but I'm not sure if you're saying you don't want to allow or what size you would allow, or
it's just strange that the only place in town we're going to allow triplexes, duplexes, and all that is really just the east side. I mean, except for just this little strip along LaGrange Road. We're just saying, hey, let's go up a bunch of fourplexes over here in this one section of town.
Yeah, and I just want to be clear on that. I assume, since we've done it in the past, those buildings across from Westfield, that's an area where they've torn down and did a fantastic job with large, nice apartment buildings. That's included in that area, I would assume?
That area is actually where Fieldside Commons East and West were
Yes.
built is R7 and R8. R6 extends also along Hillgrove between the village's western boundary and Dover.
Right.
There is a portion along Cosset there near the fields, just not those specific properties where the Fieldside Commons pieces were constructed. And then there's R6 along the South LaGrange Road corridor, as Trustee Thompson mentioned, and then a concentration on the east of the IHB tracks.
And I assume it's where areas have existing 2 flats, 3 flats.
Correct.
Do we have fourplexes currently?
More 3 flats. There are some non-conforming 3 flats that are older housing stock that were built, years ago. The R6 is the highest density residential zoning district that doesn't get into the R7 and R8, where you can do the much taller buildings in more of the sort of TOD style development. And then it goes to R5, which currently only allows for single-family homes, but this plan recommends allowing duplexes because there are quite a few non-conforming duplexes in that area that's zoned R5 currently. So to some extent, those recommendations were in the improvements that they can make.
If a lot was going to have a fourplex versus a two flat or a three flat, is that parking required? I mean, is it a bigger lot, or what's required of a fourplex versus a three flat?
Sure. So the parking requirements would be whatever we decide in the zoning code we want those parking requirements to be. The intention in the plan for these recommendations is that they are for infill lots. So one or two lots, not a block of four flats being built, on an entire block.
Okay. Does that address your concerns, or?
A little bit. That's an area that's really, if you ride through that whole area, it's mainly single-family homes, and I worry about somebody builds a four-flat on a lot where you end up with there was a big article about Minneapolis, and I think we don't have parking. Those streets seem more congested in that area, so from the residents I've spoken to and that Trustee McGee's spoken to, they weren't real happy to see that being pushed into their area. You look along Hillgrove, Burlington, those are already two flats, whatever. So it's not a big change there. This is an area of single-family homes that are suddenly going to be, they right now seem to be disappearing, being replaced by those type of things. And the residents say their children can't afford to move back. So it's just,
and I'm just concerned that there may be a couple things. First, we've all spent a lot of time over in that area, and I was there last week for several hours. There are a lot of two flats, three flats, some conforming, some non-conforming, some townhouse type of things that were clearly built in the 50s and 60s, and you look at it and say, boy, that was a different time. And I do, I've talked to some residents that are, I think a lot of places that wonder about affordability and where that goes. I'm not sure that a lot is more or less affordable. If it's a single family versus can have a two flat, I suppose a developer might, pay a little more for a lot because you can put 2 units or more. I know I think it was Brightleaf, is that the developer that came in and put in, again, I was on that block and talked to one of the residents in there, tore down a house, put in, I think it's a 2-unit building side by side. I'm sure it's called a duplex, but it's almost like a townhouse for two. It's very nice. I'm sure it's more affordable than a single-family house on a lot of blocks. But that developer said, I need to go into here because I can buy this lot for X dollars. And it's the only area in LaGrange where I'm going to be able to pay that for a lot. And again, there's 2 families that moved in there. So I hear your concerns. I'm just not sure if you're saying you don't support this for the R6 zoning, or you do, or even more importantly, what do other trustees want? And are we comfortable with the majority saying we're fine with allowing, in the right opportunity, triplexes and fourplexes and R6?
I'm comfortable in the right opportunity. I mean, we'd have to review it before it comes in. I mean, before we agree to it.
Okay.
I would concur with that.
Okay. Trustee Augustine.
Thank you. Well, this will lead us nicely into a conversation I'm looking forward to having about affordable housing, probably after this one. But I understand exactly what Trustee Thompson is trying to say, and I've spoken with Trustee McGee a little bit about it. And as we go forward to implement these areas, we do have distributed multi-unit homes throughout LaGrange. But this would be the only area that feels like a complete neighborhood that would be an opportunity for this. And so I think the concern is that it could be ripe for too much development. So perhaps the workaround for that, when we do begin to discuss this in detail, is to limit, to a few blocks or a few opportunities per block for now in the interim, and then we see how that goes. But it does address affordable housing, but it could get taken advantage of, and it could really change in quick time an entire neighborhood versus the rest of these areas that have it are already very much that now. So that I would feel similar to Trustee. I'm not speaking for Trustee McGee, but what Trustee Thompson is saying is a good cause for concern. So maybe there's limitations, but I think we should talk about it. But I think we should be careful about that particular area.
Thank you. And Charity, are you comfortable with the direction?
I think my only question is that just something that we should be mindful of as we proceed to the zoning code rewrite, or do we actually need to modify the recommendation language in the plan?
I'm hearing we need to be mindful while we're going to the zoning code. We don't need to change the comprehensive plan language. But if I'm wrong, speak up, please.
Well, if everybody who's on this board and all the staff stick around when we are having that conversation and we remember that, great. But if we need to memorialize it in this document somehow, that our discussion is to pay particular attention to that area just to be safe, it's not a bad idea.
Yeah, that there's some type of wording that talks about a density of, well, this is soft density. If a developer comes in and starts buying up lots and suddenly he controls the whole street, we end up having another place. It looks very nice, but where the 47th and East, beautiful section, but it will be unaffordable, and it'll be just a whole new area. So we control how much can be built in that area, so we still maintain some of the.
Well, yeah, and I share that concern, but I also have the concern about the developer who buys up, half the block and leaves the single family people feeling like, boy, I wanted to be on a block with single family housing, and now the developer who put these in, they're all rentals, they're transient, and I'm not getting that feel. So I agree with you that if somebody comes buying it up, that's not what we want. And, it more if it's, bought by developers that are going to rent it out, apartments versus condos and things like that, I think makes a difference on how long the people stay and what impacts it has on the community wherever it's located. I do share those concerns also.
So I think the plan has some language to address that. It says the development types described below, both the duplexes and the 3 and 4 flats in both of the zoning districts. The development types described below are not anticipated or encouraged to be employed through large-scale redevelopment. Rather, these formats are intended for infill development on 1 or 2 existing lots.
Okay. Do we have a consensus there, it seems? All right. Trustee Augustine, you'd mentioned, is this the section where you wanted to talk about changes?
Yeah, I would like to talk about affordable housing changes. I believe we're at that area. But before that, if I could just mention something about the ADUs. I sat in as the liaison for one of the Plan Commission meetings where we talked about the comprehensive plan, and they seemed to be a bit caught off guard by some of these ADUs, as I was a bit, and Charity Jones and I certainly discussed this then. I'm okay with...
Which page are you on?
I'm talking about we're on page 37, ADUs. So if we have, there's basically 2 types, right? We would have a freestanding, we would be considering a freestanding structure for, as people have been calling them, granny cottages, to be in a yard for a property that had enough land to do that. And we could also allow ADUs as units above garages that had the space. And these could be rented out. So I'm just not comfortable, and I'm not sure that we need that in this town just yet. And I've heard from a lot of residents who are concerned with that, with their neighbors putting a rental unit in their yard, let alone above their garage. So I don't want to let that go too easily. I think we have to be very concerned about ADUs, where they go. I would consider as well. So again, we can have that conversation, but I think that's a piece that, I would too. And I think that, if we removed anything, it probably would be the allowing of that, or at least the allowing of that to freestanding units.
I don't support ADUs. I don't think they fit in the character of LaGrange. Again, we don't have to tonight speak to a board in 5, 10 years, if things change. The boards can adopt it at any time they want. What this is signaling is that this board is hoping. This is an aspiration, and it's not an aspiration of mine at all. And I just don't see the majority of people in LaGrange pushing for that. Anybody else have comments on that?
I just want to make sure I can hear you. So you're talking about possible renting of space above a garage, which would be a residential use. Is that right?
Well, it'd be either renting or using for a relative above the garage for residential, or it would be a unit. She shed a small unit in your tiny house in your backyard, again, to be rented or used for a family member.
It seems to me we had a conversation where we talked about whether or not someone can have a restroom in a facility like that. But if you start adding bathing facilities, then it becomes rental property. It can be. An individual could essentially either short-term or long-term.
Right, and this comprehensive plan under this section where it's housing options and ADUs is saying that we should be looking at changing that to allow that. And I think I don't want that. I think Trustee Augustine was saying she's not in favor of that.
I'm going to agree with the two of you.
Okay, so can we delete the ADU section?
Yeah, if that's the majority opinion of the board.
Is anybody concerned with that? Okay. So we've done that. Then you had another section?
Just as an amend to that, I think it's okay, and I hope that this discussion does continue to happen, that if someone does want to use their garage with a full bath for their mother-in-law, their son who's just back from college, I'm fine with that. Code currently doesn't allow that. So that's something that I'm okay with. But the renting of that out, I think that's really going to overrun the character of the community. And I know that those things are very popular and very important and a big part of a lot of affordable housing plans. I just don't think we are Austin, Texas, or Silicon Valley. I don't know that we need that yet. And I'm hoping we don't. I'm hoping there's other ways.
I agree that we're not those towns, nor do we want to be. Okay, you had something else?
I did, and I printed it out, and it's at home on my printer, so bear with me as I try to read it from my phone. I had sent to staff some thoughts that were developed in discussions with some of our friends who come to all these meetings, and I'm looking at them right now, on affordable housing. And what they've done is they've opened my eyes to what affordable housing means, why it's a good thing, and that I don't know enough about it, and I don't know that a lot of us do. But they've studied this. They've gone to other towns where it's been successful. And so what I'm hoping in this plan we could do so that it's more likely to happen is add a little bit more information, and I forward that to staff. I won't read it all here unless you'd like me to, but generally I'd like to add some language about our goals towards affordable housing strategy, and putting together a task force to understand that, a task force that would be made up of various residents with experience in commercial development, an architect, a banker, members of the community diversity group, members of each commission, and anyone who was deeply interested. And I think if we do that, and then we have that group present to this board, we're going to understand the problems. And these towns just like us, and not like us, are doing this to get ahead of it. So when many of us want to sell our home, we no longer need the space, and we no longer want to take care of the yard of the house, but we want to stay in town. It's for that. It's for but it's for a lot of other people. It's for young couples who want to come in and can't yet afford the big house, but they want to stay here for a while. There's limits for that group, and that's what this affordable housing discussion will do for us, and it's very, very valuable. I'm not doing a good job of describing it, but if we put together this commission and we have the will to do so, and I think we do, we'll learn a lot about it, and I think we'll want to implement some of these strategies, as a lot of towns have done very successfully. Highland Park and Wilmette have done this, and we are not talking about adding a bunch of capacity. And one of the things I learned is that in Highland Park, for example, which is a much bigger town than we are, they've done a great job of it. And what a great job looks like in the end is they've added 100 units of affordable housing. That's a much bigger town. So LaGrange, if we're successful, it's a lot less than that, but it does make a dent. And we are required by law to have a certain percentage of it. And I think we're not there. And I think we're close.
I think we are.
We're close. And is that because of beds?
Well, I think it's because of all the affordable housing we have.
Well, I think if we listen to, and maybe one of the ladies will talk about it at the end, but I think we have some, but we don't have the amount that we need, and we're not addressing some of these categories. So I won't be able to crush this conversation, but there are people out there who will, and if we have this task force, I think we'll be enlightened, and I think we won't have as many questions as we do.
All right. First, if Charity could just answer the question of, do we satisfy I don't even know if it's state or county.
It's a state minimum threshold, and yes, we satisfy the requirements.
Okay. And as far as a task force, a commission, I'm not against that either. I just don't think it should be part of the comprehensive plan, which is looking out 15 years. I think, and especially from what you sent, you wanted something in the next 90 days. That, to me, isn't something that goes in a 15-year document. Depending on what it is in the staffing, I think it may be something to definitely consider in the next 90 days. But for me, maybe if we combine the ZBA and the Plan Commission into one, and then we have another commission that talks about this. I also think that lost on this is the county's plan for affordable housing, the assessor's plan for affordable housing, where they have strategies in place for apartment buildings. If apartment buildings are willing to offer affordable units on rehabbed buildings, they get a huge tax break. And to me, we have some buildings that would definitely qualify for that in LaGrange. And so there are, again, we can work in this task force, but we don't have to invent the wheel. There's programs out there where other entities are paying for these, not that they pay for it, we all pay for it when the developer or owner of the apartment building gets an affordable housing tax credit. It's just everybody else pays more taxes. That's the way it works. So that would be my thoughts on changing the language of the comprehensive plan, but I again, I'm fine with a task force or a committee or a conference or something of that nature.
I know this is a long-term plan, and I have asked that we consider it quickly. Not that language doesn't have to be in the plan, but I'm interested in seeing it done quickly. We've had people talking to us about it for over a year, and I do believe we do need some language in our code to be eligible for some of these things that you discussed, some of these builders, if they were to come in. So I think the sooner we look at it within reason, the better. And so that's what I'm asking for. And if we put into this plan some of that additional language, it will help people understand what it is we're talking about. And I can read it again. I'm not doing the greatest job here right now, but I think the language that was put together is reasonable for this section.
Trustee Thompson.
When it is on page 40, number 4. So we talk about in this plan that we're going to do a housing, consider a housing needs assessment. This study would consider the needs of various populations such as empty nesters, young professionals, yada, yada, yada. There should be some task force who's going to do that study unless a task force is appointed. So I think it does beckon, and also in talking with the ladies from the Women Leagues of Voters, and also talking with some builders who specialize, and I've contacted several of them that do this. So they get that county money, they get that state money, they look for towns that have wording in their comprehensive plans in their village code that says we welcome affordable housing. There's nothing in our code that says that. So no developer is ever going to come here looking because he doesn't see it. So we had to put the billboard out that says, hey, we're looking for those guys that come in and do that, because it takes a lot of staff and paperwork to get that money. And there's guys that specialize in it, so your average builder is not going to develop this stuff. So I think adding some of the wording into this bullet point 4 to get that added in will help get that housing study done and get that completed.
Which page are you on?
Page 40, strategy housing options, number 4. It's the
Where it says evaluate the local housing environment?
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody down on this end looking to change this language, not change the language? Where do you stand?
I mean, I agree with the general concept of adding something a little more robust here to say we're gonna further study this and sort of on Trustee Thompson's comment, sort of hang out the shingle for we're looking for these kind of opportunities.
So are you suggesting, all of you that have talked so far, instead of to further support housing affordability, the village should conduct a housing need assessment instead of consider?
I'll let you guys, if you got a paragraph or something.
Well, I'd love to know. You could give your thoughts on this. One of the new paragraphs that was suggested that we add would be, again, as I was saying, adding to this, the language that says the establishment of a housing task force would expedite the housing strategies proposed herein and should be, and that's where some of the 90 days suggestion comes in, doesn't have to be. But I think we can move on that quickly. But such a task force would utilize the expertise of existing commissions and outside resources, as well as community members with an interest in and or expertise in housing.
And again, I just can't support something that says within 90 days we
can take that part out.
That'd be fantastic. If we could start taking that out, and if you could just read what you'd like, and then we can, or I wasn't sure if you wanted Charity to do something.
Well, I wanted to see what Charity's thoughts were on this. We've talked about this a bit, and she's been here for the meetings and heard it. You know, would you be opposed to the language that I sent minus the 90 days?
So I think there are grant programs out there from the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning for housing needs assessments that communities like Grange actually score very well on. So that would probably be, from the staff's perspective, how we would seek to pursue joint funding and resources for a consultant to conduct a housing needs assessment like Wilmette had done. So I guess my only concern would be if we're specifically saying we're assigning a task force of a certain composition of local stakeholders, I wouldn't want to sort of bind ourselves already to the how we implement the housing needs assessment before we have those conversations with potential funding partners.
And again, for me, this is just what we need in the comprehensive plan, not what we actually do. And so that's keeping it, to me, generally, again, I have no problem with either. I think there's two different things. There's one, a task force kind of made up with people that are somewhat experienced in this area, but not compensated, aren't paid, aren't in any direction, and another group that what I think Director Jones was saying was there's actual formal groups that can assist with this, and which is the best way.
And I agree with her, there are, but this would just foundationally get the village and the different commissions and this board a little primer, and then we could decide if we want to go further. I don't know that we need to spend money on an outside consultant yet. Again, you're the pro, and I get that, but it sounds like a commission which is more taxing, or a task force, which is less of a burden on staff time, could in a short period of time put together some information to present to us so that we can understand this better. And yes, I'm using this comprehensive plan to try to have a good conversation about something that we haven't had in a year that we've been talking about having. So There's a lot in here, and I'm appreciative of that. We've certainly asked to have that in there, and I was just asking for a little bit more. But if the will of the board is not to do that, that's great. But
how
I
about
think
if
it's a simple ask.
Sorry to cut you off, but how about in that second paragraph, we say this, to further support of housing affordability, the village should consider formulating a task force and/or conduct a housing needs assessment. Is that satisfactory?
Yeah.
Any problems? Does that work, Charity?
Sure.
Okay. Any more with this bullet point? Next one is historic preservation on page 43, including updating our current historic inventory, development of a historic preservation plan, and creating a historic rehabilitation program. Seeing none, next one is gateways, wayfinding, placemaking, and streetscape, including expanding the current wayfinding and gateway signage, maintaining and enhancing streetscape standards and placemaking treatments, creating additional space for streetscape and larger sidewalks in the south Grange Road corridor, creating gathering spaces in the central business district and the west end. Comments?
Just one.
Sure, Trustee Gale.
And Charity, you know what word I want to see somewhere in here, and I've got a couple other spots, but I do like the use of bollards in different spots. We have narrow sidewalks. It's a an architectural feature. It defines sidewalks from roadways. I thought it might fit in here, but I know there's spots where I've literally can drop the word in. So when those come up, I'll point them out.
Well, yeah, I suppose somewhere about including expanding current wayfinding and gateway signage, that's one thing. Maintaining and enhancing streetscape standards and placemarking treatments. I guess I'm not sure. Did you want, I hear what you're saying. Bollards were appropriate, obviously.
Yeah, I know there's a couple spots where we make reference to like planters and other things, and the word bollard, I've searched many times. The word bollard doesn't appear anywhere in the comprehensive plan, and I'm going to get it in there.
Okay. Do you want it on a specific page yet?
Yeah, we're not there yet. I'll tell you when we get
there. Perfect. We'll anxiously await.
Bated breath.
Anything then on this section? Otherwise, I'll move to future land use. Future land use, pages 46 and 57, visions and goals. Any comments? And
hold on. No, I'm good. We've already covered it.
Okay. In future land use map, it's pages 52 to 57, so it's inclusive in those, but I'll just give anybody a chance if they wanted to say anything about those areas, those maps. Seeing none, moving on to sub areas. Chapter, pages 58 to 101, so long. There's a vision and goals in each sub-area. Many strategies within this chapter are cross-references to strategies contained within other chapters, but tailored to the specific sub-area. So some topics may have been addressed already, or trustees may wish to discuss on a broader scale in later chapters. The first one is the Central Business District, pages 62 to 70.
What was that, Mr. President?
You were at we're now going into the sub areas. The first one that we're going to potentially discuss is Central Business District, which is on pages 62 to 70.
Spot for bollards.
Okay, let's go.
So in the on page 65, there's a reference to high traffic volume. However, a highly trafficked roadway like the Grange Road can result in increased noise and congestion, contributing to perceived and real pedestrian safety concerns. Right, so like right down here, right, where you're sitting, if you're at Blackberry Market, right, you're sitting there in your little seat right on the sidewalk, and then there's a parked car right next to you, right? Those kind of locations, perfect spots for bollards. Also, further down on LaGrange Road where there's no parking, where there's no parking along LaGrange Road, right where the Chase Bank is, right? These are locations where, the thing that protects you from a car is, a 2-foot curb. Instead of defining the pedestrian space and the road space, via that, you can have a space for bollards. So you could even say like, in that last sentence, inserting, I don't know what the phrase is generally for planters and bollards and other.
Pedestrian safety, and I mean, I know it says
Right.
safety concerns.
Right.
Contributing perceived and real pedestrian safety concerns.
If I may, the section that page we're on is the planning considerations. So those are more just the background context for the recommendations. But perhaps we could figure out if we want to include the word bollards on page 67, 1A, sidewalk and parking bump outs.
Yes,
talks
you
about
got it.
street furnishings such as benches, planters. We could include
Benches, bollards, and planters.
Any concerns with that? All right, yes, that'd be a great addition. Of a bollard? It's those
gonna show 'em a
black poles
picture.
generally that separate traffic.
They're the yellow
Pedestrians.
things at the gas station that keep you from running over the gas pump is my vision of a bollard.
I'm thinking of like those
Ugly.
silver, like posts that come up, yeah.
Sometimes they are.
Or sometimes they're nice and black and ornamental and they look
Well,
really nice.
From what I understand, and I've done a little bit of reading, people really don't see them.
Well, you'll see them if you hit them with your car.
Do you mean pedestrians trip over them?
Well, I'm saying, looking out, walking into, I've seen them grocery store that I frequent down in Florida. They're present. You don't even see them. You walk around them, but that's what they're doing. They're keeping a car from.
So you're saying that they're not an eyesore. You don't even notice them.
Correct.
Gotcha.
That is
Don't even
correct.
notice
They are not an eyesore.
Gotcha.
I think they're down in the city, around.
Pretty much every building now.
Yeah, you probably see them every day.
Okay. Trustee Augustine, are we on bollard still or a different?
I'd like not to be. But I think just one point for me on that is, and as Trustee Peterson just said, there are a lot of bollard-type structures in the city. Some are temporary, some are permanent, they're expensive, they look strange, they are trip hazards, they can be very safety-oriented. So if we do these things, I'm sure they'll be part of a plan where they make sense. Could they be integrated into something that's also a bike rack? But I don't know that, I don't know exactly what Trustee Gale is describing when he's pointed out these areas, what it physically looks like, so I'm having a hard time, but sure put it in, and then we'll have that conversation down the road. But I wanted to talk about, if we're done with that, something else.
Okay. On the CBD?
Yes. In the central business district, and I've long had this as an issue, very concerned about parking and our supply. I know we had a parking study, and I know it indicated that we have an adequate supply, and I didn't agree with parts of what they found for different reasons. The study times, that the counts were done in a short period of time. I think, and many residents and many businesses do think, we still are inadequate with parking, especially on the west side. And as I said a year ago, and it didn't play out yet because there was a particular restaurant that hadn't opened, but there's one that's about to open that will further impact our parking supply in a major way. And I don't know that we're ready for that, and I want to be ready for that. So I don't know what the language would be, Charity, but I don't know how to do it. It doesn't have to be here, but we should continually be addressing the supply of parking on a regular basis, where it is, how it serves us. We had a trustee here years ago who thought we wouldn't have to worry about this by now, but we do, and I think we will for quite some time. So, what do we say here in this study, and is it missing that we should be looking more deeply at what we do. I know for the businesses, we're looking at some considerations to allow them not to have as much, but that just puts more supply on the street.
That's my problem with it.
So, but I'm worried, and I know we've talked about some creative ways, and we've found some creative ways, but I'd like us to be having that discussion very soon on how to fix that, because there's going to be a big jump of employees from this new restaurant on Calendar and whatever businesses go in the old Chase Bank on LaGrange and Calendar, just in that area alone, which is already, I think, the area that is most impacted.
Yeah, so I wasn't sure when you said west side, if you meant west side of LaGrange Road or if you meant the west side of town.
West side of LaGrange Road, although I think the West End is an issue as well, and a lot of that has to do with the amount of post World War II apartments that never had parking to start with.
Right. So, and again with the west side of LaGrange, I think everybody in the parking study concluded it is the most in need of parking. It's where the lots fill up. They did fill up, if not 100%, 99% at the peak times. And Manas, for example, did just start valet parking, and the Elm has done valet at different times, and that was their plan when they first opened. Wooden Paddle, I believe, is going to do valet. At least that's what they've indicated to us. The Chase building will probably have dining establishments in there. Saturday night, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, it's going to be more cars. It's just definite. So.
I'm greatly concerned about that, and I feel more like that should be something we're looking to address, and it should be something we continually address. But since we have the audience and we're talking about these things, as we expand our wonderful central business district and the other business areas, we're going to bring these businesses in, and then we're going to run into some issues. So when can we have those conversations about supply? Because whatever we do, some of this stuff could be solved immediately. We've talked about some of these options, and some are long term. And I'm just really concerned that we're going to have a big problem on our hands in the next 6-8 months.
Okay. Any other comments on the central business district?
President Kukler.
Yes.
Just in here on page 65, it talks about more comfortable pedestrian railroad crossing.
In the planning considerations?
Yeah, under community input.
Under community input. So that's things we heard from the public.
Okay. Very good. Because I'm like, how do we make it comfortable?
Well, it's generally speaking LaGrange Road, especially as you go farther south, and 47th Street.
Yeah.
Ogden would be another road that
we talked about, but
it's difficult.
Talking about the railroad crossings at LaGrange Road and Ashland Avenue, and I don't know how you make them more comfortable. They need to be very safe. So, I'm not a big fan of the sidewalk and parking lot bump outs, and one in particular would be Burlington, and I'm not picking on Lucas, but to me, I think Burlington Avenue between Ashland and LaGrange should be one way. When you get there on a Friday night, Saturday night, people are eating, and people trying to turn out of Calendar Court to go toward LaGrange Road almost have to swing into oncoming traffic. It's a very tight, narrow road. Now we have people sitting in the street. I just think we need to be careful with these bump outs, because we're just getting diners too close to the automobiles, and I love bump outs, but they just seem to be taking up valuable parking places and places where cars need to go. So I think we need to control how much of those we add.
They definitely take up parking spots, and the restaurants definitely love them. And I think that's the balancing of it. And I think we do have rules on how much they can have and things like that.
I just think that one particular block just is to me is a danger zone, because that's a narrow street anyway. Go down it any time of day. It's narrow, but to then have that at night when it's dark, people sitting outside and having two-way traffic in that street just seems a little bit tight to me.
Right. I don't know that how to put it in the comprehensive plan, I guess.
I guess we need to look at traffic restrictions. If we're going to add more bump outs and those type of things, we need to look to make sure the roads are really wide enough to handle the traffic that is going on. It should be restricted. So
I hear what you're saying there. That obviously with the railroad station being there and the way Hillgrove feeds from the east side of LaGrange Road across there, obviously a lot of issues on flow and things like that and how it would change that in the RTA and buses and a whole host that I don't know that we're going to be able to do. I definitely think continuing to work on best practices and that is great. Any comments on the West End, pages 72 to 80?
Yeah, a couple of comments.
Yep.
So again, as Trustee Augustine brought up, spaces for parking is limited, and then one of the suggestions is to add more bump outs and take away parking places. To me, this is an area where we can't give up any parking places and need to create more. So.
Yeah, I'm concerned with the language where it seems to here we're saying, hey, build like the new Hillgrove building with questionable whether it has enough parking and things like that, and then saying, so lessen that and say we don't have a parking problem. If we have a parking problem, the time to address it is when those buildings are there, to make sure that they have enough parking for both their commercial use and the residential use.
Well, I also think in that part of town we have a zoning parking issue. I don't think the Hillgrove building will add residential parking to an issue. I think they've built enough places for that, but the commercial building, the retail parking that will go under that, there's very little retail parking in that block anyway.
Right.
So you add more evening retail parking, it just blocks the rest of the people that are already there, nowhere to go. And it's all high school kids parking in the commuter parking places anyway. So can we change that? And I know we've talked about changing the restrictions on hours so we can kind of shoo the high school kids out of taking some other places, but what can we do to open up more of that parking along the railroad tracks that's not being used by commuters anymore to be used by retail people? And I think it should be part of the comprehensive plan is how we look to how to restructure all the parking in that end of town so that we can free up more but not let all the high school kids take it.
Right, which seems, well, again, the challenge there is, if we had 2-hour parking or 3-hour parking, right, it eliminates the high school kids. But then we're hearing from some of the business owners that they have employees that want to park 8 hours. Right. And so it's, the way then is, are those business employees willing to pay and having a sticker that says.
And from the people I've talked to, the employees are willing to pay. In fact, they'll buy the commuter tickets, commuter spaces, but those businesses open at 9 o'clock.
No, I get what you're saying. The students have already parked there.
Yeah, so if we can restrict the hours that, hey, you can't park here before 9 o'clock in the morning, the high school kids can't park there. So we limit where they park and then open up more places for employees of those businesses.
Right, and I guess, yeah, that's one way to do it. The other way is a sticker of some type, an emblem, that along there they have different zones already. But Director Jones.
I have just a suggestion, maybe.
Sure.
Based on some of the comments. On page 80, for the West End specifically, there's a recommendation about working with LT, and it's more focused on bike racks and enhancing pedestrian pathways and walkability. But perhaps we could add to that and, working collaboratively to manage student parking demand, because we have heard that that's an issue in the area. Some of the other things that were discussed are recommendations in the parking study that we are working our way through implementation.
Well, we have number 3, right, on transportation and access, eliminating parking minimums for occupancy of existing commercial buildings in the West End.
Right,
Which to me just strikes as we're saying you don't longer need to have any parking.
So no, it's really, it's that one specifically to address existing buildings. So if it's an office use, right now the zoning code, because they're existing buildings, they might have one parking space, they might have no parking spaces on site. If that office use leaves and a retailer wants to go in, or a cafe, or a fitness use, or anything like that, they aren't able to because they can't meet the parking requirements. So that is as much an economic development recommendation as it is related to transportation, because it makes it more challenging to lease those buildings.
No, and I get it, and I'll pick on the fitness users or the fitness clubs. They all say, "Oh, my people are so healthy, they're going to bike and walk," and I can tell you they don't. I don't. Nobody does. But what are we saying here, though? If we are eliminating the minimums, I guess what Trustee Thompson is saying, that's fine, but we have to have a plan to where these people are going to park. And for our purpose, it appears the low-hanging fruit is to take the student where the students are currently parking and make those to be able to be used by the merchants, the customers, things like that. And how do we do that in the comprehensive plan, I guess?
So I think some of those recommendations about how to better utilize the commuter parking spaces, which is really where some of the students are occupying, in addition to the designated student parking zones, are addressed in the parking study. That's something we could revisit with the board about those approaches, and if we want to revise any of those. I think what I'm hearing is, in addition to the recommendations in the comprehensive plan about implementing the 2022 parking study, that we also maybe want to have a commitment that we're revisiting parking strategies on some regular cadence in the plan.
Are you comfortable with being able to incorporate that?
I think we can. I think we can incorporate something either within these two sub areas. If it's really the West End and the Central Business District that are the primary concern, we can focus it there. Or alternatively, we could include language in the broader transportation chapter.
I think either way, the board just wants to just be able to more frequently discuss parking.
And on page 79, can we eliminate point B?
Well, I think one area that was done well, which is what they have in that picture, which is Milk Stop.
Agreed, but that's a loss of 6 parking places by Milk Stop. So if we allow those to continue as businesses move in, we're shooting ourselves in the foot to ever get parking places. It's just not an area where there's enough parking places left.
Well, I mean, one, I want to go back to what we were talking about earlier too, but with this, I mean, I want that to stay. I think that's important, and it's a part of the balance between parking and parklets. And it's written to say just identify opportunities. So as part of this overall study, where we're looking at the parking, this should be, I think, part of it as well.
And there's parking literally to the south there. It starts, again, for somebody dining at Milk Stop, all they have to do is go right past.
We just had a conversation that we have an issue with parking in the West End, especially for retail, and now we're saying, and I'm not saying eliminate.
I agree with
I'm
what
just
you
saying
said.
we're to go look for places to add more.
Primarily what we're talking about in parking spots, we're eliminating parking spots, and it's strange, but so many of the businesses that want to come, want this to be available to them, and saying, no, you're not going to be able to open a restaurant on the west side and have this parking, or we're going to take it, whether it's Antonino's, Milk Stop, or some other place that's hopefully coming. I think that the balancing, but so I guess what Trustee Thompson we just should ask with the feedback is Trustee Thompson would like that to be eliminated, that be parklets. Trustee Gale, I think you said you wanted it in there.
Yeah, I'd like it to stay. Yeah.
Any other trustee feedback so that we can get a consensus here? Okay, trustee Peterson.
I'm just part of the ambience and character of the community, so I would leave it as well.
Trustee Augustine.
Thank you. You know, there's a couple different issues that kind of overlap here. I think the one at Milkstop is lovely, but it's taking up valuable parking. And a lot of the parklets that were in the central business district are no longer. And I've been hearing from residents that they're very appreciative of that because, again, they're driving around looking for spots. So when parking is one of our biggest problems, and we still allow this, it's lovely for the business. I get that, but it impacts the ability for people to move in and out. And so, I mean, if we don't have to debate it, I don't feel strongly one way or the other if we take it out or leave it in, but I am finding that it is a problem and I wouldn't want to see more. I really wouldn't, because I don't think it's overall good for a town that right now has a parking problem and it's about to get worse. And I think what Ms. Jones has said about the businesses who might be in office now but might want to sell, if we make them have to have a certain amount of parking in those spaces, then those businesses are going to sit empty. So I think what
to the end, and although it's not what your wishes are you comfortable with us moving on from B?
You can move on. We've been outvoted, so it
Right.
doesn't matter, but I'm not comfortable. But could carry on. I will not support it one way or another. I do not support it at all.
My question, just let me.
Move on. We've been outvoted. Move
Correct,
on.
but you still can support the comprehensive plan generally.
Yes, I just don't support
Perfect.
that point.
Absolutely. And there's nothing wrong with that. And, you know, people should say strongly, I don't like this section, but I've gotten outvoted and I'm ready to still support the comprehensive plan. Now, I think you had, Trustee Augustine, some other comments you wanted to make?
One last point on parking, in particular in the West End. That end really has trouble with parking from the residents who've never had a space, and there's a lot, police get a lot of calls to ticket people who are just shuttling their cars around the neighborhood overnight. And so we know that's a problem, and we're here to try to, if we can, try to alleviate the problems and fix those problems. So we've got residents, we've got businesses, and we've got residents, businesses, and the school, you know, the students, and it's a huge problem. So, you know, to address all three of those, I think is possible. To just say, oh, let's make it harder for the students, they're just going to then race around town more, and that's dangerous, and it's not good for them, and they're zipping out in between classes. So I've heard, and I don't know from either side, but I've heard people say that the school says that's LaGrange's problem, and I've heard LaGrange say that's the school's problem. Maybe we need to address that together, so I like that section, Charity, that you pointed out on page, I've lost it, where we could note that we work with the high school on some solutions, but adding parking to that. So, you know, if they've got surface lots on Cosset, you know, perhaps there's down the road, there's a two-story garage, and underneath we bury water to help solve some, and these are years down the road, but they take a long time to get there. We could solve some flooding, we could solve parking, we could charge the students as they do now. The lucky few who get a lottery to park there pay quite a bit for that, or the person who wins it, who doesn't need it, sells it for more, I've been told, and I have been asked to speak to students who are really struggling with parking. So it's a huge problem, and it is a LaGrange problem, and it is a safety issue, and it takes up an unnecessary amount of police ticketing time. So to solve these problems is big. You know, there was a time when nobody wanted this parking garage, and we built it, and thank goodness, and it helped this part of town grow. And if we don't do something like that on the West End, we can't grow with apartments and condos, and we can't even meet the needs of the existing group there. So I think we have to look at, maybe it's the Metro lot, maybe it's in conjunction with the LT lot, but get some very creative discussions going so that we can look at creative ways to solve all three of those problems.
Thank you.
Mr. President, I had a couple of I hate to circle back, but I just had a couple quick questions for Charity. With respect to the parking in the West End, when we're talking about that, are we including all that sort of parking right along BNSF all the way down to Gilbert? I mean, because there's just a row of parking that sits there and it just goes on forever. Now, at some point, you're too far away from the West End for it to be useful, but I mean, to me, every time I look over there, it's just empty.
So the West End district, as for this sub-area of the comprehensive plan, that map is shown on page 73. So the western border of the district is Dover, and the eastern border is Kensington. That was really reflective of, one, the eastern border being the boundary between West End and Central Business District, and then two, where the commercial properties stopped on the western edge. It wasn't as much indicative of whether there could be parking for that district beyond those borders, but those are the parcels that would be involved in land use and development decisions in the West End.
Yeah, it just seems to me that, an extra block down, 2 more blocks down, I mean, there is parking down there. At some point, if you get too far away. But I would just, there's no change to the plan, but just that should be included as part of our discussion.
And the parking study does speak to parking as far south as Cosset, the 2022 parking study.
Right, but it doesn't go south of Cosset, right?
Not south of Cosset.
So, and then the other question I had back to the lack of minimums, right? We don't have that downtown, right? In the downtown, there is no minimum parking requirement, right?
That's correct. For permitted uses, there's no minimum parking requirement. A parking requirement can be imposed for special uses. So, for example, a small fitness use is a permitted use, but a large-scale gym like an LA Fitness is a special use.
Right.
So things like parking demand can be evaluated through that process.
Okay.
All right. South LaGrange Road, any questions, comments on South LaGrange Road, pages 87 to 95? Oh, I'm sorry, North End, please.
I guess just have one question on page 86, number 2, and I don't mean to be anti-environmental, but anything that would reduce line of sight at the corner of LaGrange and Ogden, seems to me it would be a chance to increase accidents at already pretty dangerous intersection. I love to put in.
Trustee Thompson, if you could just speak louder into the microphone, they're having trouble hearing you down here.
So on point 2 on page 86 under environmental sustainability, I love the environmental sustainability, but to put gardens or plants at the corners of Ogden and LaGrange Road where we already have a high number of accidents that occur with cars making left and right turns, I just think that's a dangerous place to put in flowers to block any view there. It's already a pretty bad intersection as it is.
Can you address, is that a concern with these gardens block views?
So certainly we wouldn't install anything in the right-of-way that would block or be an impediment to driver visibility. I think an example is actually that photo that's on page 86, where you can see that we have parkway trees along this stretch, but we don't have the other kind of landscaping amenities that we do in the Central Business District. And I think that's what that recommendation is really related to, is improving that pedestrian experience for people walking through this area so that it's similar to the kinds of amenities that we have in the Central Business District.
Okay.
So not seeing banners, which they had talked about as being consistent throughout throughout LaGrange, and which would have the effect of joining at least the north end to the Central Business District with, I think they were saying that in the south end too, using banners to, I'm trying to consider what I'm, just have a more consistent flow of of visual amenities for residents and also for people shopping in that area. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes, that is a recommendation in the South LaGrange Road corridor. Our banner program does extend to the northern end of the village boundary with the commercial properties. So we do have the LaGrange banners in the north end, but they are not currently in the South LaGrange Road corridor.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any further comments before we move to South LaGrange Road? Pages 87 to 95.
On page 91, as I look at the LaGrange Road looking north existing and LaGrange Road looking north potential, I'm trying to understand, so the suggestion is take a 10-foot parking lane and reduce it to 9 feet, and then put in an 8-foot sidewalk, which right now we're really talking about making this a residential area, so I don't know why we need a huge sidewalk, but also lanes of traffic in that area are 10-foot wide only. To reduce a parking place by a foot up against a semi-truck on LaGrange Road seems a little bit risky. I mean, this, standard lane widths are 12 foot for major highways, and these are already narrow lanes, and we're talking about reducing our pedestrian area down when people are getting out of their cars by a foot. To me, and I don't understand the need for an 8-foot sidewalk. We don't have an 8-foot sidewalk anywhere else, and if we're really talking about putting in townhomes and condos, why would we put in such a wide sidewalk area in that area?
All right, do any trustees want to comment, or I can ask Director Jones to explain, or Mr. Blue to explain what's going on? I certainly don't know.
Yeah, I'll let the TESCA team speak to this a little bit, but the South LaGrange Road corridor sub-area does talk about denser residential or commercial mixed-use development.
Thank you. A couple things to try and accomplish here, and Director Jones has spoken to a couple of them. One is to not give up the parking. Since we've been talking about parking, let's talk about that, because that was where we kind of started, was do we need the parking? And the consensus as we went through was, yes, let's not lose the parking. The idea was to also, as there's redevelopment in the area, to use the depth that's available to add more pedestrian comfort. So this is all a balance between those factors, and that's why we've traded a foot of the parking space, for instance. Final design is going to happen if and when somebody comes and wants to redevelop there, but the idea here is to convey that balance. I hear what you're saying about the narrower parking space. The parking spaces, the extra foot would help. It's still a tough place to park given the traffic that's on there, but that was really the idea, was to have the plan convey the idea of that balance between pedestrian, cars, and the moving traffic.
Do we know what the parking is? And I'll just use as an example, Blackberry Market. If somebody were to park heading south in front of Blackberry Market on LaGrange Road, is
How wide that
is that
stall is?
9, 10, 11?
I don't know offhand. We could certainly follow up with that information for you on what our standards are, and then what we also have existing in our various different on-street parking areas.
Because I have parked there, and I agree. You're close. I don't know that you want to get closer, but I don't know what that foot is.
Well, also because that area, and you basically have had a mile to come up, semi-trucks not running the speed limit most of the time. You get into downtown LaGrange, you're getting hung up in traffic, so you're a little bit slower. But it's just that people are changing lanes, moving around. It's to narrow that just seems a little bit risky to me. I wouldn't want to park there. Like you said, I wouldn't want to park there now, but definitely wouldn't want to park there with it narrower.
All right. So I'm not. If you had anything more on that, Trustee Thompson, I'm not sure what you're asking for as far as the comprehensive plan. If you're asking for a change or just wanted to express
I just
concerns.
want to express that we need to, as we look at this, we really need to decide, especially if we end up going with townhomes and all that. I don't see a need for an 8-foot sidewalk in that area to reduce that. So it just depends on what gets developed there.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you. All right. Moving on to industrial districts. Page 96 to 101.
I think we skipped 95.
Did we skip LaGrange Road, 87 to 95?
Were we covering 95?
Page 95?
Yeah.
I'm just looking on my sheet. It says South LaGrange Road goes from 87 to 95, but whatever you want to ask,
Well,
please feel.
I had one more thing about that on page 95.
Okay.
What we're doing here, what Trustee Thompson and a lot of us here are doing tonight, is kind of amplifying and discussing what we like, what we're concerned about. Some of these things may not require language change, but I think it's a good time to discuss this amongst the board. And one of mine is on page 95, and it's regarding something that was really first on my list, one of the first things on my list when we began this comprehensive plan, and it was connecting this section between 47th Street and Plainfield on LaGrange Road. there's no stop signs, there's no stoplight in a very, very long stretch. It's the longest stretch of anything. There's usually every 4 or 5 blocks, there's at least a safe crossing or a stoplight, and there isn't on this stretch, so kids can't get from the east side to Gurry. I'm really happy that this section is in here, and I think we can have some equity in these communities. There's businesses on that road. There's a lot of people who live on that road. It's a super fast section of the road. People can speed up. They hopefully get the light, and then they tear up through into town if they hit that light. And if we can slow it down, and I know IDOT won't like it, but if we can slow it down with a light at 50th or so, I think we would have safety for the young people trying to get to their baseball games, trying to get to and from school, trying to get businesses, and I think it's just long overdue, so I'm really glad to see this here, and I was surprised it wasn't in the 2005 comprehensive plan. I do have a question, and I know that we'd get pushback from IDOT, but again, the communities south of us and north of us have more frequent lights, so it seems to me that we have a chance of getting this. What would be our first steps from staff to get the ball rolling on potentially getting a safe crossing at that point?
You know, to be honest with you, I've not endeavored on that specific kind of project previously, so I don't have a ready answer for you on what the first steps would be.
Yeah, no, I can take that. No, thanks, Secretary. No, we are engaging already with Baxter and Woodman on areas in that specific to look at planning for our kind of larger upcoming future federal aid projects, and then engaging with them and through their specific elements within IDOT for their transportation folks that are part of that. So working through our engineering consultants to structure that permit in the right way is really the first step.
Thanks.
All right, moving on then to industrial districts. None? Going down now to transportation and access. The first section is vision and goals. Any concerns on that? And while you're looking, I can tell you I have a concern on page 106, which is the goal of eliminating the 50-50 sidewalk program. I think our 50-50 sidewalk program could be improved. The scheduling, the web page, things like that could definitely be improved. I've never heard anybody indicate, let's scrap it and have the village pick up the remaining costs. Where we're going to get the budget for that. So I'm on page 106, number 1, I think. Under strategies, pedestrian network, might be page 107.
Yes.
Moved toward a village managed sidewalk replacement strategy. To me, what we should be doing is making it easier to apply for the 50-50 program, making sure that we have in our budget to get everybody's done while we're still capturing the contribution from our residents. And if that needed to be tweaked because, in affordable housing or something, there wasn't a cost, I'd be interested in that, but I don't see scrapping it. Figuring out where to get the money to pay the other half, or even a suggestion that we're going to do more sidewalks, where this money comes from. So, what are people's feelings on taking out the section about number 1, or at least I don't know if 1 has things more than the 50-50.
Well, I do have to say I like the comment here about when there is analysis of the conditions of streets to include the conditions of sidewalks. That makes a lot of sense to me. So that's not really addressing what President Kukler is saying, but I think that is a very good idea.
Well, what would we do?
What do we do in that circumstance?
Let me answer that. Maybe direct it to Director of Public Works. It's Mike, because I've seen around the village what we've done in the past, which is we take asphalt of some type and put an asphalt patch in front of your house if you don't want to pay for 50/50 of the sidewalk.
So yeah, our current practice is if there is a reported defect in a sidewalk, we'll come out and do what temporary repair we can, which is typically asphalt. And that individual's asked and placed on a list for a 50/50 sidewalk program. I mean, just to clarify, at least how I interpreted this, it's not to say that the cost participation or cost share would be eliminated, but currently, and just reading this cost split between the resident and landlords, the onus is on maintaining the village infrastructure is placed on kind of the private resident to decide to opt into the program. And that becomes problematic from like a trip and fall liability perspective and not being able to go out there and address defects that fit into certain major defect type categories. So the thought might be that this again developed, but you develop a rotational program where you do sidewalk shaving, which is a way to address defects without having to do large scale removal and replacement. And for ones that are above 2 inches in defect, we could remove those, which would be a lesser quantity. And then you kind of systematically move through the village. And then we could still maintain the option for people to opt in if they want to go out of cycle or if they have minor defects that are, say, less than 1/2 inch and they desire replacement. So that's, I think, the way that I interpreted this.
All right, I definitely don't interpret that it says that at all, but I'm not against sidewalk shaving at all. And I'm not against if a resident says, hey, I don't plan to repair my sidewalk, us coming in and putting down asphalt in front of their house to make it safe. I definitely don't think we should, from a liability standpoint, ignore a known defect, especially one that's in excess of 2 inches. So again, if that's what it means, fine. I don't see, where that's communicated at all in this language. To me, this is sending into the 50/50 program, making a municipal responsibility. I understand that, in a perfect world, having, us go around once a year and repair.
I like the 50/50 program because, you are repairing stuff. Because when we look at the rest of the wording in this, priority should always be given to the heavily trafficked areas. And I'm afraid that's what would happen, is suddenly the guy that lives on Wayola and 51st, that's not a heavily trafficked road. So their sidewalks are never going to get replaced, but they may want to have them replaced, and they're willing to pay. So if we eliminate the program, there's no chance for those citizens to go, hey, my sidewalk's broken apart, it's raising up, it's falling apart, the roots have pushed it up. We don't ever see it because it's not, but it is a trip hazard for everybody that goes for a walk in those areas. So I would like to see it. I think we maintain the 50/50 program, and at the same time, we have kind of like we're doing now, we have a separate city program that focuses on these high volume areas. So we're not counting on the citizen to fix the block that's one block south of LT High School. That we're working on it as a combined effort.
Yeah. Again, I'm in favor of eliminating number one. I don't know if people are supportive of that or not. Just how I see.
Thank you, President Kugler. I think the 50/50 program is a good program, but I see where Mr. Colby is coming from, and I'm certain that it's very frustrating for the village to have quite a few homeowners who are unaware of the 50/50 program, but also who just simply aren't going to fix their sidewalk. You do it, is what they're going to say. And I know that they just maybe can't afford that. So I think what maybe Director Colby is saying is that this would eliminate that. So maybe there's some kind of hybrid here, but the concern is, and that we're all concerned about, is the trip hazard. So the shaving program of these sidewalk pieces, which started on my block last week, are amazing, and the residents love that. And that's a lot less expensive and better in every way than replacing those chunks. But that's not going to solve it for all of the problem pieces. We had a stretch of, I think it was mostly the south side of 47th Street between Wyola and really up to Sedgwick that I think, Rick, was in your first year here that we talked about. And nobody was fixing their sidewalks there. And it was really bad. And there's a lot of strollers, a lot of kids riding bikes. And Not exactly sure how we went in and did that, but we went in and we fixed a really dangerous stretch, and it was so much better for the community. So, Rick, I think it's something that's worthy of more discussion from this board on this, how to handle it, because I know it puts the village in a tough place to see these really dangerous people, because people have been going, I mean, my lifetime, there's some horrible blocks or some horrible pieces on my street, and they're not gonna get fixed. So, you know, I don't know that we wanna cite these homeowners for that, but what do we do when we have dangerous pieces? Who pays for it if the homeowner won't? The municipal program would address that, but we also don't have the money for that, so I don't think we can do it either. But I'm glad it's here so we can have this discussion, but I agree that it's not the right time for it. But how do we fix the things that need fixing in this category? I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, I can see sort of a compromise language here where we're basically saying, look, we're going to keep both. We're going to still have, we're not going to eliminate 50-50. And I see, President Kukler, I see your point with the bullet point 1 literally says move towards a managed sidewalk replacement strategy rather than the 50-50. So we should say, no, we're going to keep the 50-50, but we're also going to have a more comprehensive look at how we handle the sidewalks. I think a couple of edits here about, keeping the current 50-50 program and dropping in while the strategy is not unusual, we're going to, and it's going to remain in place. It keeps the onus, and then you can keep, because I like the idea of a more comprehensive look, though, too, of our sidewalks.
Agreed. Yeah, I like those ideas.
Well, so maybe strike the whole first paragraph and then go with a municipally managed maintenance program would allow the village, take that out, and just say the village could expand its regularly scheduled street conditioning survey to include sidewalk conditions. And then prior to, so maybe putting in consider there, that the village could consider expanding its regular scheduled street condition survey to include sidewalk condition, and then prioritize improvements in the areas of greatest need.
I agree, but I also think if there a way we can include what Trustee Augustine is saying is that we need to make it or address the fact that people don't know about it. So we would improve communication of this program somehow.
Right. I mean, one area we could improve a lot on communication. On our water bills, we could, that we're allowed to put things on our water bills. We could talk about, we're taking names for the 50-50 sidewalk program, things like that. Communicating more on our webpage about it. I'm just trying, again, to get through the comprehensive plan and the language that we need for the comprehensive plan. Yeah. So that's where I'm moving. I don't know that we need in the comprehensive plan that will improve communication of it.
Well, I
but
would agree.
I'm open for whatever your suggestions are.
I agree with, I think that the statement move towards a village-managed sidewalk replacement strategy is not shared by the majority of the board.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, does that give you some direction, Charity, or not necessarily?
No, I think that's good. I will come back with some language following this meeting. I think we can come up with something.
We have a couple of big ones still left.
President Kukler, point number 3 on that same section, to move to a 6-foot standard sidewalk instead of a 5-foot standard sidewalk. I'm not really in favor of that, and the fact that if we're only going to replace squares, suddenly I'm going to have a 6-foot square, and we're going to have to get to a block and say we're going to pull up this entire block of the sidewalk to go to a 6-foot sidewalk. We can't. I just think we should leave that out. Our sidewalks we have great.
I have no problem striking number 3 either. Let's hear from the other trustees. Anybody have concerns with anybody advocating to move from a 5-foot to the 6-foot and number 3? Okay, so 1 gets chopped down a lot, 3 gets eliminated. Hopefully 2 gets really highlighted and emphasized then, because that's what we can all agree on. And 4 makes sense to make sure we're doing everything we can for people with disabilities. We're at 10:05. Generally, we quit at 10. I'm not sure how much more people have thoughts on the rest. I know that there were some emails going around about bicycle and how long that was going to take. There's parking mentioned at 117 and 119, parking minimums and things that may take some time. Environmental sustainability. So I'm not sure. Maybe I'll start down here. Do you have a lot more to discuss on the comprehensive plan?
What page are we?
Got a handful of flags here, yeah.
Got a handful of flags.
Okay, down here, do we have things to discuss?
I've got some flags, yeah.
Okay, so it sounds like we're not going to be able to get it done in, let's say, the next 15 minutes. Everybody agrees with that? I think we need to continue the comprehensive plan to either, maybe Village Manager Knight will tell me what that means as far as scheduling.
We have a meeting on the 28th, and we can schedule it for then.
Okay. No need to wear costumes, but we will be meeting on October 28th to kick off the Halloween week with the comprehensive plan. So moving on to our legal advisor, Attorney Schuster, what do we need to do to move this discussion to October 28th?
Would just be a motion to continue to October 28th.
I'd entertain a motion and a second.
I'll motion to continue this discussion to October 28th.
Thank you, Trustee Augustine.
Second.
Thank you, Trustee O'Brien. All in roll call or?
No, voice vote is fine.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And that passes. Oh, any opposed? And that passes unanimously. All right. I'm now opening it up to public comments on matters not on tonight's agenda. Good evening.
Al Foreman, 7th Avenue here in LaGrange. First, thanks for your tedious review of the comprehensive document. My hat's off to you. It's a lot to read. And I'm happy to hear that you're continuing it because I can then have an opportunity to comment on agenda items next time. But I have 2 items that I'd like to tee up, and this comes under the heading of, I would say, transparency and communication. On the famous topic, which I'll now just call stories by right, it seems like we've kind of pushed that to a to-be-determined code review. And I want to ensure at the time that that code is actually going to be reviewed, that it's a public process, open to hearings, et cetera. I don't have any experience, but as an example, I can see that, you've reviewed sections of the town code. I'm not using the right words, but your agenda items early in the evening, the attorneys comb through all that, and, hopefully it's all routine. But I think the code will be the last chance for the R5 owners to kind of lay down on the tracks to say, we don't like this. So my plea is to make sure that the public is going to know when those revisions are going to be considered and how they'll be publicly discussed.
And let me interrupt right there and maybe have somebody on staff a plug on signing up for our alerts, our meeting alerts. Who wants to handle how best to do that and make sure anybody at home knows that?
Absolutely. So the best way to stay informed about all village business is to sign up for alerts from our website. You can get texts or emails, and that's one great way to stay informed. Much like we had with the comprehensive plan, where we had a project website specifically dedicated for that effort, numerous social media posts, public meetings, and a public hearing. which of course also gets advertised in the newspaper. Those same kinds of efforts will be employed for any zoning code amendments as well.
Okay, thank you very much. The second point, and it kind of ties back to the Forward LaGrange website, which it was a wealth of information, and I'm assuming the consultants own the website. I'm not sure, but you know, the idea wall, the comments by location, awesome. But at this stage of the game, I think the transparency and communication breaks down. Now, you could send in comments, but I can't see what others have thought about, right? And it might be interesting to get some statistics that would say, gee, after we published the first draft, X% of our comments came on the stories by right scenario. Or, you know, somehow close the feedback loop for all those that have looked at the Forward LaGrange website and say, how does it, and maybe this has to occur over time yet, how does it manifest itself in the final document? So we all know what input we had, and it's a democracy, and I'll accept your decisions, but we're kind of losing all the momentum that you gained by widely making available all the input. But now the important public comment cycle, I'm not seeing the ability to see what my neighbors may be interested in and saying, et cetera. You all probably have emails of all that, how it goes to the website, but I can't see it.
Well,
So that would be my request.
we don't necessarily, but we have emails about all that.
Okay, but
so.
but it's, I mean, it's a great website, hats off, invites comments, but it's just like you can't see the comments other than your own. So that's my
That great suggestion, and maybe we can incorporate that somehow, maybe at the conclusion even, just saying, right, we had 1,000 visitors or 10,000 visitors and comments, and here are some of the hot things that were discussed, or, you know, different things.
Perfect, perfect. Thank you very much.
And Mr. Foreman, before you go, thank you for coming with Coffee with the President. I appreciated you coming out and sharing your thoughts on a more informal basis, too.
I appreciate it. It was very informative for me, and I understand I can't talk to three of you at the same time. Thank you.
Just at the podium there. Thank you. Seeing no other public comments, any trustee comments? Trustee Augustine.
Thank you. President Kukler, first and foremost to Tesca and to our staff for the, year and a half now? This has been put together, going through reviews and coming into this implementation stage. Again, it's really impressive, and it's great to see. The last time the village did a comprehensive plan was 20 years ago, and that's fairly common, every 15 to 20 years. This is what it looks like. This is our 2005 plan. This is how we bound things back then. Why do I have that period of time? But it will change. But this is a fresh, incredibly important, and uncommon project. One of the things I'd like to see us do with this, and there's language in the 2005 plan that suggests this, is that we should review it as a board, and commissions should review this periodically. 3 to 5 years, I think, was the suggestion in the 2005 plan. I've been on the board going on 6 years now. We've not reviewed it. And I think that it going forward, when someone joins a commission, when someone joins the village board, they should be given a copy of the comprehensive plan. And yearly, I think, we should have a chance to at least talk about it and go through a few things. We don't have to change anything, but just to familiarize current and new board and commissioners as to what this is and why it's important, because we're spending a lot of time to put this together. And yet, I'm sure, does anyone else have a copy of this? Has anyone else read the 2005 plan? So if we're going to do all this, we should be very familiar with it, and we should be going over it fairly routinely, not every 3 to 5 years. I think through commissions and the board, different sections, at least every year. We don't have to do every page like we've been doing, but I just think it's really an important document. And if we don't know anything about it, we can't do anything about it. In the 2005 plan, and we'll talk about this next meeting, there's a whole section on bike paths. We never did it. I don't know if we're going to do it in this one either, but why didn't we do it? Number of reasons, I'm sure. But if we're not talking about things that are in here ever until we do the next one, I think that that's a problem. So I'd like to just make sure that we build in some routine meetings for that. And again, this is part of the document that's sitting on my printer at home, so I have to look at this to get the rest. That's the main thing that I have for just as a statement about this comprehensive plan. So we would not just suggest periodic review, but we implement that. And Charity, I know that's something we could do. So that's really it. That's my main thing. And then also I'm newly, and I've been to one meeting now for the EQC, our Environmental Quality Commission, a great group of residents who are really, really passionate about some good ideas for what this village can do. And I know they're concerned with being a bit more, they want to contribute more to this, to what we do and how we do it and our understanding of the issues that they think are important for the village. And a few of them have asked about potentially increasing the frequency of meetings. So I'm just using my voice as a trustee to suggest that maybe we review that for them and consider allowing them, if it works out, to have more frequent meetings and to deliver more information to us from that group, because now it's really important to be considering those issues. And they're motivated. They don't always feel like what we've been given was what they asked for, and they're not blaming anyone, but I think that if they can meet more frequently and really dissect what's coming to us and what we're hearing and how we're implementing it, some of them have suggested that the frequency would help. So, maybe we can talk about that after, or we can put it on the agenda for discussion, but or maybe it's the next meeting with the EQC, but I promised them that I would bring that up.
Thank you, Trustee Augustine. Any further trustee comments? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And we are adjourned, coming back October 28th. Thank you, everybody.
Oh.